record.
Hi there, and welcome to our talk about gaming for good and exploring the barriers faced by disabled people. My name's Molly, I'm the public fundraising lead at Scope, and this is my colleague Emily.
Hi there, I'm Emily, I'm the senior public fundraiser.
So before we get stuck into the findings of our research into gaming, we'll just give you a brief introduction to Scope. So we are the biggest pan-disability organisation in the UK, and we provide advice and support for disabled people and their families through our helpline, our online community and our face-to-face services. And we also do a lot of campaigns work and policy work to help create a fairer society. So we'll just show you a really quick video so you can get a bit more of a feel of who we are and what we stand for.
When we talk about the fight for equality, who do you think of? The rebels, the freedom fighters, revolutionaries, free thinkers. They fought to make our society more equal, more fair, more democratic. They refused to be invisible, would not go unheard, and stood beside those who could not win alone. Each generation adds a voice to the strength of the movement, ensuring that it lives on. But inequality remains across society, across generations, across the world. 1 in 5 of us in the UK is disabled. 14 million people facing prejudice and negative attitudes every single day. If we join our voices together, we can change this. We can all lead the life that we choose, free from discrimination. Every one of us can make a difference. Will you be counted with us, like those who fought before? Be a disability game changer. Join the campaign today. Together, we can end this inequality.
So hopefully that gave a bit more information just about who we are as an organisation. And we also wanted to talk a little bit about the social model of disability. So there are a few different models, and Scope subscribes to the social model. So in brief, we believe that people are disabled by barriers in their society rather than their impairment or condition. And to sort of explain this a little better, in the physical world, this can be really obvious, sort of by not having a wheelchair ramp outside a building that stops a wheelchair user from getting in, or in the digital world, it can be sort of websites not being easy to navigate, or games not having appropriate color contrast on their subtitles. And so how does this sort of impact disabled people and their choices? So our colleagues in the Big Hack team at Scope are the experts in digital accessibility, and their recent research showed that 80% of disabled consumers will spend their money where they face the least access barriers, and 71% of disabled customers will actually click away from a website that they find difficult to use, which is unsurprising, but it is really costing businesses, and they're losing out on what we call the purple pound, which is essentially the spending power of disabled people, and the click away pound, which is relating to the 71% of disabled customers who click away from websites, was actually valued at £17.1 billion in 2019, which is obviously a really vast figure that companies are missing out on.
So what has all of that got to do with gaming? So in the wake of the pandemic, we have had to move away from more traditional forms of fundraising like events. All our events were cancelled, our face-to-face fundraising activity was paused, and all of our shops had been shut for most of the year. So we've been exploring new forms of digital fundraising, and fundraising through gaming, or gaming for good as it's known in the charity sector, has been on the rise for a couple of years. And our kind of initial investigation showed that there was a bit of a connection to our cause, because gaming is often seen as a more accessible hobby compared to things like sports, for example. And we've certainly seen an increase in media coverage around gaming and accessibility. There seemed to be quite a lot of hype around that. So we did a bit of desk research, and we sort of realised quite quickly that we knew relatively little about gaming or gamers. So we set out to learn more about this audience and really sort of gather some useful insight on whether there was a need there, and whether there was a connection to Scope, and whether we can fundraise through gaming. So our research objectives were to learn more about who games, how they game and why they game, to understand more about the experiences of disabled gamers specifically, and are there any barriers or frustrations? What does disabled gamers care most about, and how are they using adaptive tech, and whether or not that's working for them? So to give a bit more context, we're kind of coming at this with two objectives. So the short-term objective is to build a fundraising event or activity around our audience of disabled gamers, but we also have a longer-term objective to have a positive impact with and for disabled gamers. And at the moment, it's kind of open as to what that will look like, and this survey kind of represents the start of unpicking that. So a bit about the survey itself. So prior to conducting the survey, we did a lot of desk research, but we weren't really able to find very much that really helped meet all of those objectives. So we decided to conduct our own survey, and it directly compares the responses from disabled and non-disabled gamers, which we couldn't find much of out there. And that will help really identify any major differences in behaviour and motivation and people's experiences. So the survey consists of 5 main sections. So firstly, the demographic section, which is all the kind of standard stuff, age, gender, location, and so on. But there's also some questions around employment and whether that's been affected by COVID, and also some detail around people's impairment or condition. Next, we ask about behaviours and motivations. So how often are people gaming, what platforms they use, whether they play alone or with friends or with people they met online. What people like and dislike about gaming. Then we ask about live streaming, so how often people are watching, whether they stream themselves, what platforms they engage with, and whether they donate to content creators or not. We ask a bit about charitable behaviour, so what causes people are supporting, whether they engage with charities and how that works or has worked for them in the past. And really there we're just kind of trying to gauge people's propensity to fundraise for us. And then finally, there's a section on accessibility and representation, which we'll go into a bit more detail on. So of our 1,500 respondents, 1,043 considered themselves disabled or have told us that they have an impairment or condition. So this section of the survey obviously only went to those respondents, and Emily's going to share some of the key findings with us now.
So one of the first questions that we wanted to ask our disabled respondents was what poses a barrier or issue to you gaming, and this is really so we can understand sort of the scale of the problem, if that exists at all. And our results found that actually 2/3 of gamers with an impairment or condition reported facing a barrier or issue when gaming. The most common barrier reported was the affordability or the suitability of assistive or adaptive tech, with 30% of respondents reporting that. But our research also found that there were some other issues sort of relating to the knowledge and or the time required to set up assistive tech, with 23% of respondents reporting that. The limitations on the choice or availability of suitable assistive tech, reported by 22% respondents, and then the inaccessibility of consoles or inaccessibility of games, with 18 and 17% reporting that respectively. So it's obviously quite a large figure of gamers who are sort of facing barriers when they're attempting to game. And we wanted to dig a little bit deeper to understand what, if any, assistive or adaptive technology disabled gamers are using to combat some of those barriers or issues relating to gaming. And respondents most frequently used accessibility features built into games. So 70% of our respondents reported using those features. And this finding highlights a really great opportunity for games developers and producers to incorporate inclusive design and consider disabled gamers at the very point of development. Having said that, we do recognise that obviously hardware solutions and software solutions are also widely used, with 57 and 51% of respondents also using those. So clearly all three are quite important, and the relationship between them is also important to consider. And this is obviously just a top line summary, but we have lots more detail on sort of the specific types of technology that people are using, and we can go into a more granular level in relation to sort of the impairment or condition as well, which is all available in our full research report. And we also wanted to find out a bit more about whether the information on accessibility has affected the purchasing decisions of disabled gamers. So we asked, in the last 12 months, has the lack of information on the accessibility of a game affected your decision to purchase it? And only 35% of our respondents reported that there hasn't been a lack of information that's affected their decision, which is quite a low number. 21% of respondents reported no, and they decided to purchase the game anyway, but 51%, so just over half of our respondents, reported yes, and that the level of information had impacted their purchasing decision. And if we look into that figure a little bit more, 9% reported saying that they had purchased a game specifically due to a good level of information on accessibility, but contrasting that, only 42% reported that they hadn't purchased the game because of the lack of information on accessibility. So it's quite a sizable audience here who developers are missing out on with sort of a relatively easy fix. And then on the back of this question, we also asked, in the last 12 months, have you purchased a game that you haven't been able to play due to poor accessibility? And once again, nearly half of our disabled respondents reported purchasing a game that they haven't been able to play due to poor accessibility, which is a really vast figure. And when we asked them if they could return the game afterwards, only 14% reported being unable to. This equates to 1 in 7 gamers with accessibility requirements losing money as a result of inaccessible games. And when we link this back to some of our research that we did in 2019, we found that disabled people face on average extra costs of £583 a month. And these extra costs mean that disabled people generally have less money in their pocket than non-disabled people. And when they then decide to spend their money on a gaming product and they're not able to use it, this highlights a real problem and quite a large injustice. And interestingly, younger gamers aged 18 to 35 are much more likely to have purchased the game that they haven't been able to play due to poor accessibility. And this is really significant when we consider that young people are some of the biggest consumers of games and technology, and typically they have less disposable income as well.
Okay, so we asked our respondents what are the top changes that they'd like to see implemented in the industry, and 31% of disabled gamers said that they'd like to see a commitment from gaming platforms to tackle negative attitudes and bullying online. So we kind of recognise that this issue obviously spans far wider than just disabled gamers, and that lots of players will kind of experience negative comments and abuse in games. However, this finding does correlate with another finding from our survey that 2 in 5 disabled gamers have experienced bullying or negative attitudes from other gamers, specifically relating to their disability, impairment or condition. So, you know, respondents also reported that this impacts how much they play and the enjoyment that they get from gaming. So it's something that does kind of need to be addressed. Then looking at other priorities for gamers, so the next top ones were that more accurate and more frequent representation of disabled people or characters within games. So 25% of people said they wanted more accurate and 23% said they wanted more frequent representation of disabled characters. And that kind of links in with some recent research from Newzoo into diversity and inclusion more generally, where they reported that 47% of UK respondents expressed that it is important for the games they play to have diverse characters, and that was particularly present among disabled gamers. So this kind of move towards more diversity and inclusion on our screens and in our games is something that we need to kind of act on, and it's clearly important for disabled players. And then other changes that people wanted to see. So 20% of people said that more affordable assistive tech options would be beneficial. 17% said that they would like better information on accessibility before purchase. 17% said they didn't want to see any change, and 16% said that a wider range of assistive tech options would help them. So that's kind of the end of the insight section of our talk, and we hope that you found it useful. So we'd really love to hear some feedback from people, and anyone who's interested in finding out more about our research or working with us, we'd really love to hear from you. There's partnership opportunities to work with Scope, both on our fundraising event and on our longer term plans to have that positive impact with and for disabled gamers. So there's obviously a lot left to do, and while there's some fantastic work happening across the industry, and I'm sure we'll hear more from everyone else speaking at the conference, it does feel like there is still work to do, and Scope would really like to be a part of that. So if you'd like more information or the full research report, you can go to the URL shown here. So that's bighack.org/gaming-for-good. Or you can email us at gaming@scope.org.uk and we'll get back to you. Thanks very much.